Hello, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing a whole swath of filming for my end of the year, but for this video we are going to be discussing my least favorite reads of the year. But it's mostly going to cover just the books that I did not think were that good. Let's go over my most disappointing reads first because I didn't rate either of these two books super bad. I just was not impressed by them. The first one would be Descending Stories Volume 1. I read the first two volumes this year and it's hard because I loved the anime when I watched it. I remember the anime being really slow at first, so I want to equate my enjoyment to that. But this is a historical fiction manga series following a man who has a job called a rakugo, which basically means that he does a particular Japanese art form of storytelling. And so far, this has not come close to my memory of watching the series. And I don't know if that's just because the beginning is slow or if the anime was better able to portray the story because it was more visually compelling than the manga. But I want to stick with this series. I gave it 4 stars. I still really like the story and where it goes from here, but I want to know if I misremembered the series, what is going on? But I will get to the bottom of it next year. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It's not bad, it just was a little disappointing because not as quite as amazing as I remember the anime being. My next disappointing read, which I gave a 3.75 stars to, is Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. Having now read the entire series, this just feels like such a misstep to me. The ending of this book, like the last 30-50 pages, was so good. The battle was so amazing. The first book is such a interesting start to a fantasy series, lots of promise. The third book was an amazing finale, such an excellent finale, but this second book just really didn't work for me. The first 150 pages, the action plot felt way too similar to the action plot of the first book. It really felt like a carbon copy, and so I was just really not interested in what was going on. It really felt sloggy, and while I love the characters, I do feel like the characters sometimes read a little bit flat. It's hard because I feel like they have a lot of interesting facets to themselves. The writer did write really interesting backstories for all the characters, but because this is a mainly plot-focused series, especially the second book, the kind of interestingness of the characters just feels like it's kind of passed over. It feels very flat. So like I'm learning interesting stuff about the characters, but the only thing that the characters are really doing is the plot stuff. So we can't really get into them as much as I would like. Especially this book, like the two main characters are in a relationship with each other at this point. They are dealing with a lot of psychological torment and problems, but we don't get a lot of that relationship on page or those inner turmoils on page because we're so focused on just like the plot beats. So like not bad. The series as a whole is one of my standouts of the year, honestly, that final book. But that second book, it felt like a second book. It just, until the ending, it really didn't do much for me and I was really worried about how the series was going to turn out. But now that we've gotten the disappointing reads out of the way, let's get into the bad of this year. And we are going to be going in order from the least bad to the most bad. So starting off, Don't Hate Me, I Have This Winter by Alice Oseman. I gave this 3 stars. This is definitely, I believe, one of their earlier works. I think their writing has improved a lot throughout the series of writing Heartstopper. I just feel like these 2 earlier novellas, as well as Solitaire, as writing do not hold up to what they later write. I felt like I just did not enjoy the narrative. I did not enjoy being in Nick and Charlie's heads, which is really sad because they're 2 of my favorite characters. This is a novella for Heartstopper, and to me it didn't really add much to the story. It's hard because it's YA, but it did feel a little bit juvenile to the rest of Alice Oseman's works. It just did not completely get up to the level of some of her other stuff. So yeah, I'm sorry. It was a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't bad. It's not the best of her work. The next book I have here is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio, which I gave like a 2.75 stars to. Just very solid, middle of the road book. It is a YA fantasy and it had so much potential to have a character coming into her own power and to have this really beautiful character arcs journey. It set itself up for that, and then it just focused really heavily on the plot and the romance, and the kind of character themey moments were kind of ham-fisted in there in very short spurts. It's so hard because there were so many things that I love in this book that just didn't work out for me. Like If you made a checklist of tropes and things that I enjoy in books, this book would have it, but the book itself, the craft, how it was paced, it just wasn't well executed in my opinion. It wasn't bad. This author definitely has a lot of potential, but this book just felt like it was rushed in its creation and that it was focused on the wrong things for what the book was trying to accomplish. Next, we have May the Best Man Win by Zur Eller, and this is a YA contemporary story about a trans boy who is trying to become prom king, trying to prove his ex wrong. And again, this is one of those cases where it's like, this is a YA, these are teenagers, they're acting like teenagers, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating to read. I think as a teenager, I still would have been frustrated with the main character and his choices. I would say the other perspective is a little bit more enjoyable. His boyfriend's perspective is a little bit more likable, but at the same time, this is just very kooky, just characters being messy and all over the place, but not necessarily in a really fun way. This is like a 2.5 stars, 2 stars, and apparently the author has been doing some shady shit on Twitter. That's where all the authors do their shady shit, let's be honest. It wasn't great and I wouldn't recommend it. And I probably won't read anything else by the author because it really didn't work for me. It just wasn't my kind of story, I guess. Going into my second best, worst, least favorite, I have Oaths of Legacy and Vows of Empire. Vows of Empire is a 3 out of 5 stars, 2.5 out of 5 stars. Oaths of Legacy is like a 2 out of 5 stars. It was really bad. This is part of the Bronze of Brass trilogy. These are the second and the third book. The second book was definitely way worse than the third one. I was so disappointed in this series, so disappointed in the execution of these two books. The first book, it set up itself for so much potential to be a fun, plotty, rompy, space opera-y story, but still have a lot of character and heart and romance. These two books were just, they ruined all of that expectation and hope I had for the series. This book was just, we were stuck in one of the characters' heads and it was so unenjoyable to read. He was so stuck physically, like he was physically encaptured, and so he couldn't do much and was just bitter and awful to read from. But also he had so much room for character development and it didn't do any of that. And then this book pretended like he had done some character development and was a better person. That never happened. So yeah, this book was just disappointing to read. It was better because we weren't stuck entirely in his head. This book floundered and flopped in so many ways. This series, it's just really sad because I had such great expectations for it. I really liked a lot of the setup in the first book. There were so many things that I thought were so much fun, but the second and third book it really shit the series in the water for me. I don't think it worked. I really don't. But it is a space sci-fi adult series, so if that's something you're interested in, check it out. Maybe you'll like it. You can then come tell me that I'm just wrong and I have bad taste. I think what's most disappointing is that I wanted to be a champion for this series because it had basically fallen off the earth of Book Talk and BookTube after the first book. And so, you know, I was ready to advocate for this series. I was ready to champion it and be like, yes, gays, come get your queer space opera book. It's here. But no, I can't do that now because those books were awful. And my final book, my least favorite book of the year, is Fence: Striking Distance, which is just so disappointing and so disheartening in so many ways. I wanted to love this. I love this series already, so the novelization having ruined part of the story is just so awful. And this also comes from an author that I trust. I read her standalone novel last year. It ended up on my favorites. So to this book to end up on my least favorite books of the year, to be my least favorite book of the year, is kind of insane. This is like a 1.5, 2-star read. It is basically a standalone story in the Fence universe, so I don't even think you have to read it to read Fence. It happens after the events of the 4th volume. I hated it. I hated the narration. I slogged through the pacing and the plot. This book tried to emulate the kookiness of the series, but it does not translate well, and the way that the author took the characters and kind of put her own spin on them and just how she characterized them, it made it seem like, how did I describe this? It really felt like the author was trying to write neurodivergent characters, but was just doing a really poor job of it and didn't know how to do it properly. The main characters of the series are idiots, and so I don't think their idiocy translates well into a novel format, into being directly in their brains. Like, these characters are not stupid. They're like stupid I wouldn't say stupid. Like, they're naive and ignorant in certain ways, but not to the extent that the author wrote them. Like, this was just, it was bad. It was really really bad. So yeah, those are my least favorite books of the year and my most disappointing reads of the year. And I expect that these 5 will be on my Pango for selling purposes in the near future. So if you want to buy them, they will be available. But yes, those are my least favorite books of the year. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know what your worst reads of the year were. For the most part, when I read 2 stars and 3 stars, a lot of times I'm like, you know, this book just wasn't for me. I just didn't enjoy it. But a lot of feelings and anger came out just now. So I guess I do have opinions sometimes, very strong verbal opinions. So let me know if I'm wrong in the comments and let me know what your favorite reads of the year were. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later and happy reading.